Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. In the baggage claim area of the airport, the air was thick with anticipation. Alongside me were my brother-in-law, Victor, and his two daughters, Aurora, aged 8, and Nora, who was 10. My own children, Gerald, 13, and Peggy, 10, stood beside me. The kids were proudly holding up a large sign that read, "Welcome home, moms." 3 weeks earlier, my wife Cassandra and her sister Kimberly had traveled to Costa Rica to unwind on its sandy beaches. It was the perfect escape from the freezing Minnesota winter, particularly in January. The moment had finally come. We watched as the passengers began streaming through the door, and the children couldn't contain their excitement when they spotted their mothers. Both women walked through the gate, their sun-kissed skin glowing, faces alight with joy. Cassandra wrapped her arms around Gerald and Peggy, kissing them deeply before pulling them into tight embraces. Then she turned to me. Without hesitation, she gave me a passionate kiss, pulling me into her arms. I held her close, savoring the moment. "I missed you so much," I whispered. "Wait until tonight," she whispered back, her breath warm against my ear. "I'll show you just how much." That evening, Cassandra definitely made good on her promise. After 16 years of marriage, she knew exactly what excited me, one of those things being tan lines. Once the kids were tucked in, we headed straight for our bedroom. "Sweetheart, lie down and get ready for me when I come out of the bathroom," she teased, her voice hushed with anticipation. Minutes later, she emerged from the bathroom wearing nothing but a thong bikini. Her face, always the most stunning feature, was glowing in the soft light. A face made for smiles. But she often criticized herself, feeling she was too short, too thin, or not proportioned the way she wanted. After having 2 children, her body had changed, her breasts fuller and more shapely. The bikini, small as it was, emphasized her beautiful curves, but the best was yet to come. She stood at the foot of the bed, her golden tan almost radiant in contrast to the white skin where her thong had been. Slowly, she pulled the thong down, revealing the pale patch of skin beneath, marked only by faint lines where the straps had once been. My pulse quickened at the sight. Then she untied the bikini top, allowing it to fall away, exposing her soft, pale skin. I crawled to her, my hands grabbing her waist as I pulled her close, kissing her chest as my hands roamed over her body. Slowly, I kissed my way down her stomach, and we spent the rest of the night rediscovering each other, enjoying the intimacy we had missed. A few days later, Cassandra was cleaning the bathtub, and I stood in the hallway, watching the sway of her hips as she moved. She must have felt my gaze, for she glanced over her shoulder at me. "What are you doing, just standing there?" she teased. "I'm just thinking about what I'd do if you weren't wearing any pants and the kids were already in bed," I replied, not bothering to hide my desire. She laughed, shaking her head. "You're a pervert," she said, giggling. "You tease," I responded with a smile. She tossed the gloves into the sink, then sauntered over to me, her body moving with a fluid grace. She pressed her entire form against mine, her belly pushing into me. "This is how you tease," she murmured with a playful smile. But something shifted in me, a subtle unease, a feeling that something was wrong. It was hard to put my finger on, but it was there, lurking beneath the surface. Cassandra, sensing my hesitation, sighed and pulled away, clearly frustrated. "All talk and no action," she remarked, a final hip thrust punctuating her words. She walked back to the sink to grab the gloves. "Might as well finish cleaning," she muttered. That's when it hit me. A small detail, something almost imperceptible, had caught my attention. My heart sank. Without saying another word, I turned pale and walked out of the room. "I'm going to the garage," I mumbled, too lost in my thoughts to care if she heard me. Sitting on the workbench in the garage, I couldn't shake the sense of dread that had taken root in my chest. Was it possible that Cassandra had been unfaithful while in Costa Rica? If she had wanted to, I was certain she could have easily found someone there to spend time with. The more I thought about it, the more I wondered, what would I do if it turned out she had cheated? The answer was clear. I would leave her. The thought of ending it all was painful, especially with 2 kids in the picture, but the hurt was already there. Why had she done this? What had I done wrong? I spent the rest of the evening grappling with these questions, though deep down, I had no real proof of anything, only a gnawing suspicion. I realized the only way to know for sure was to dig deeper. After all, the affair, if it existed, had occurred thousands of miles away in Costa Rica. I couldn't confront her outright. She'd just deny it. But what about her sister? I considered talking to Kimberly, but I knew her well. She and Cassandra were both equally stubborn. Instead, I decided to talk to Victor. Maybe he could help me uncover the truth. A while later, I heard Cassandra calling me, and I returned to the house. "What have you been doing in the garage?" she asked, noticing the time. "Over 2 hours and you're going to catch a cold," she added, sounding concerned. I shrugged it off. "Just tidying up," I replied, trying to mask my unease. Then an idea hit me. "I don't think I'll sleep with you tonight. I already caught a cold this morning. I think I'll sleep on the couch," I said, noticing the dismay in her eyes. "All right," she said reluctantly, but offered, "I'll make you some chamomile tea before you go to bed." Once she was in bed, I was left alone with my racing thoughts. My mind spun with possibilities, but one thing became clear. Cassandra was always on her phone, always connected to her vast network of friends and acquaintances. If she'd gotten close to someone in Costa Rica, she would have exchanged contact information. I didn't know if she used her current email, but I did know her passwords. The next day, I was drained, barely able to focus at work. I called Victor to arrange lunch. When we met, I told him what I had found. At first, he laughed, thinking it was a joke, but when I showed him how serious I was, he promised to look into Kimberly's actions. Claiming a bad case of the flu, I left work early and headed straight home. There, I installed a keylogging program on our computer. A week passed before the truth came to light. Cassandra had been logging into a different email account. Using a password tied to our children's names and ages, she had been communicating with a man named Buck since their return from Costa Rica. The emails were explicit, revealing that Cassandra and Kimberly had both been sleeping with men while on vacation. Cassandra had even swapped partners with Kimberly at some point, and they were already planning another rendezvous in Chicago next month. I forwarded all the emails to myself, erased any evidence of my snooping, and then sent the damning files to Victor. It was clear now. They had been sleeping with these men almost from the moment they arrived in Costa Rica, and their plans to meet again were already in motion. I quickly scanned Cassandra's and Kimberly's social media accounts, uncovering 2 new acquaintances, Buck Sullivan and Steve Reiner, both from Illinois, both married. This was the break I needed. The pieces were falling into place. The task ahead would be tough, but I was determined. Victor had always dismissed the idea that Kimberly and Cassandra were cheating. He believed in his wife and kept my concerns to himself, never fully trusting my suspicions, even though I could see the cracks. I understood why Victor felt the way he did. Looking at Cassandra's interactions with me and the kids, it was hard to imagine that she was planning to destroy our marriage. She was so affectionate and kind that at times I questioned whether I was overreacting. It helped to convince myself that she was still the loving wife I thought she was, enough to continue our intimate life. So, I called Victor at work. "Hey Victor, it's Tyler," I said. "Can you check your personal email from work?" "Sure. Did you send me something?" "Yes. Read through the emails and call me back," I instructed. It wasn't long before he called back. "Damn it, that witch!" Victor's voice was full of fury. "Tonight, I'm throwing her out," he shouted, the pain and anger palpable. "I love that woman. I would have done anything for her." "Victor, calm down," I urged. "I have a plan, and I need your help. We can't let them know we know." "I can't. I just can't," he muttered. "We'll hurt her, Victor. We'll make sure she suffers. I promise," I assured him. "But for now, keep it together." I advised him to call home and leave a message about working late. "Meet me at the Old Town pub tonight. I'll explain the details." That night, we met at the pub for the first time to discuss our strategy. "Victor, what would really hurt them?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Besides physical violence, what can we do to make them feel the pain?" Victor stayed quiet for a moment. Shame, he said finally. I want to shame them in front of their families. You know how much Tom adores his daughters, right? I replied. It's no secret. But you also know what he hates more than anything. Cheating wives. A knowing smile crossed Victor's face. That's right. Cassandra's mother, Kimberly's mom, she did the same to him all those years ago. After the divorce, she walked away with everything. Custody of the girls, the house, the alimony, child support, and a huge chunk of his company. He was forced to take out loans to buy her out of the business. Took years to get back on his feet. Victor nodded. Tom's doing well now, but he's alone. He visits the girls, but still it hurt him deeply. I explained my plan further. We just need to keep up appearances for 2 more weeks. Be the good husbands, Victor. Take sick days, work late, make sure we're too exhausted for anything else. Have intimacy with them once a week to keep the act going, and soon we'll be free. Later that evening, I returned home after a long day. Cassandra was already in bed. I pretended to have a terrible headache and fell asleep quickly. The next day, Cassandra mentioned a shopping trip she and Kimberly had planned to Chicago. I played along, telling her it was a great idea. She mentioned staying at a downtown hotel, and to show my support, I went ahead and booked the room myself, using our joint credit card. The reservation was made for Mr. and Mrs. Johnston, a double occupancy room, as Cassandra and Kimberly were supposed to share it. The two of them were ecstatic. Victor also booked a room for himself and Cassandra, a double occupancy reservation under Mr. and Mrs. Duraca, for the same reason. We both knew they weren't actually going to share the room, but we had no idea their lovers would be joining them. Their plan was simple. They'd leave on Friday morning, spend the weekend in Chicago, and return on Sunday evening. A week later, I called Tom Raines, Cassandra's father. I told him I was planning to surprise the girls by bringing him and the kids to Chicago for a family gathering, just 2 weeks after our 16th wedding anniversary. Tom loved the idea. I need 3 rooms, I said, so we can all stay close together. I think they'll be really surprised. Tom agreed, and we were all set. Victor and I were disgusted when we saw the way Cassandra and Kimberly acted at the airport that morning. They were like teenagers on their first date, laughing, nervous energy all around. At the security gate, we kissed them on the cheek, but neither of us said, "I love you." They didn't even notice. Victor drove us back to town, and I quickly pulled out my phone. "Hi, it's Johnston," I said to the private detective I had hired. "They'll be landing soon. Is everything set?" "Yes, Alan White here," he replied. "We've got everything covered. The rooms are set up with audio and video, and I'll have the recordings ready when you arrive tomorrow." The next morning, we all met at the airport. During the flight, Tom switched seats with my son Gerald and sat beside me. "Listen, son, I'm not some old fool," he said. "You and Victor are up to something. What's going on?" "I'm sorry for keeping you in the dark, Tom," I began, "but I have some very bad news. I think the girls are cheating." He raised an eyebrow. "Cheating? On you guys?" "Yes," I said. "They've been sleeping with 2 men they met in Costa Rica. I've got a private detective gathering evidence for the divorce. We'll be filing as soon as we catch them in the act." Tom's face fell. "I'm sorry, son. I know how painful this is. I thought that spending time with me would bring some sense into them, but I'm afraid the damage done by their mother is too deep." He wiped away a tear. "I didn't think I could hurt this much again," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. After he composed himself, we made our way to Chicago. Alan White met us at the airport with 2 envelopes, one for Victor, one for me. Inside were compromising photos and a DVD of the previous night's events. Alan updated us that everything was in place, and the operative was monitoring the 2 rooms. We'd get the most opportune moment to confront them. By midday, Sullivan and Rayner's wives would receive similar packages. Victor and I asked Tom and Alan to watch the kids for a while. We needed to see just how bad things really were. When I saw Cassandra in those photos, every position imaginable, sometimes with 2 men at once, it nearly broke me. I can see unprotected intimacy happening in the pictures. I knew Victor and I would have to get tested for STDs once we got to Minneapolis. Alan called his assistant to confirm if the hotel was clear for us. The lovers had gone to lunch, leaving the rooms vacant. Tom had booked 3 rooms, and Victor and I requested extra key cards for rooms 201 and 203 under our names. We made our way to the hotel, telling the porter our kids had planned a surprise, so he wouldn't warn our wives. After an hour of waiting in our rooms, Alan White called. The time had come. They had returned from lunch and were now in their respective rooms with new partners. Cassandra is with Rayner now, and Kimberly's with Sullivan, he informed me over the phone. I'm in the lobby, and the process server just showed up. I'll send him to your room. I switched off my phone, climbed out of bed, and called out to the kids cheerfully, "All right, time to move, everyone." Turning to Peggy and Gerald, I reminded them, "Remember what I told you. Grandpa and I will go in first. When I give the signal, you both shout, 'Surprise, Mom!' Got it?" "No problem, Dad," Gerald replied confidently. "And whatever you do, don't come in until I say so," I added firmly. We ascended the stairs and paused at the door marked 201. I slid the key into the lock, quietly turned it, and crept inside with Tom. The kids trailed closely behind, but patience wasn't their strong suit. The moment the door opened, they burst in, shouting, "Surprise, Mom! We're here!" Cassandra was sprawled on the bed, positioned on all fours with Rayner behind her. To say our entrance was unexpected would be an understatement. Rayner scrambled off the bed, snatched his pants from the floor, tugged them on hastily, gathered the rest of his clothes, and bolted from the room. Quick reflexes, at least. Cassandra leaped up, frantically trying to cover herself. "No, no, no! This isn't happening! What are you doing here?" she shrieked, her face pale with shock. "Mommy's naked!" Peggy squealed, squeezing between Tom and me. I snapped my fingers and the process server entered, holding an envelope. "Cassandra Johnston?" he asked, directing his question at the only unclothed adult present. "That's my mom," Peggy chirped, eager to be helpful. Without missing a beat, the server handed Cassandra the envelope. "You've been served," he declared, snapping a photo of her clutching the papers while trying to shield herself. With his job done, he left. I turned to the kids. "All right, let's give Mom some privacy." We exited the room, leaving Cassandra sobbing on the floor. She didn't need to open the envelope to know what it contained. Victor and his kids were waiting in the hallway. "Your turn now, Victor," I said. Things didn't go as smoothly with Kimberly. Sullivan, apparently the aggressive type, reacted violently when interrupted mid-act. He punched Tom square in the face. That was all the provocation Victor needed. His fist met Sullivan's jaw without hesitation. Kimberly, trying to defend her father, clawed at Victor's face. Admirable loyalty, misguided as it was. I stepped in, grabbed Sullivan, and dragged him into the bathroom, tossing his clothes in after him. "Get dressed and get out, you jerk," I snapped. Tom, Victor, and the kids left the room. Kimberly, showing no shame, followed them wrapped in a blanket. Victor glared at her. "Go back and get dressed," he ordered sternly. Like a scolded child, she turned and obeyed. The process server, who had vanished during the commotion, reappeared at the door. "Kimberly?" he asked. "Yes?" He handed her an envelope. "You've been served." After that, we regrouped upstairs. The original plan was to spend the night and have a final conversation with our wives. But I had no interest in sharing a roof with Cassandra any longer. I packed our bags and told the kids we were heading home. Tom decided to stay. He had things to discuss with his daughters. Victor and his kids joined us back to Minneapolis. 4 months later, despite Cassandra's desperate apologies, the judge granted our uncontested divorce. Convincing her to sign the papers had taken every ounce of Tom's persistence. The house was legally mine, a gift from my parents before I met Cassandra. I was awarded primary custody of the kids, though I didn't request alimony. Tom ensured we were financially stable. We divided our other assets equally, and Tom even gifted me a generous sum that Christmas, joking it was from Cassandra's future inheritance. Victor's divorce followed a similar path, though they had to split their jointly owned house. Interestingly, not long after, Victor and Kimberly rekindled their relationship. I wouldn't be surprised if they got back together. A shame, really. As for Cassandra and me, there's no chance. She claimed to regret her actions, and I believe she does. I even believe she still loves me. But her betrayal obliterated my love for her, leaving nothing but the bitter remnants of infidelity on the sands of Costa Rica. There's nothing left. For the children's sake, we maintain polite civility, but that's all. One day, while waiting for the kids, she asked, "Tyler, how did you find out about what I did in Costa Rica?" I smiled faintly. My love for tan lines. She looked puzzled. "I was in a bikini the whole time. We never went to a nude beach." "Think about it, Cassandra. What do you do every time you clean the bathroom with all those chemicals?" She tilted her head, recalling. "I roll up my sleeves, put on gloves, gather supplies." I cut in, "You forgot the first thing you always did. You took off your wedding ring and engagement ring. When you came back, there was no tan line where they used to be. And that was all I needed to know." My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. What began as a seemingly mundane conversation between Ethan and Sarah soon spiraled into an event Ethan could never have foreseen. The couple, married for just over a year, had always appeared ideal, young, vibrant, and ostensibly devoted to one another. But one evening, Sarah broached a subject that would unravel their marriage in ways Ethan couldn't yet imagine. She casually floated the idea of pursuing intimacy with a coworker, a suggestion that would set the stage for a betrayal so profound it compelled Ethan to devise a calculated form of revenge. Ethan considered himself a man of unwavering principles. His commitment to Sarah was absolute, and he had never allowed himself to stray, not in thought, let alone action. So when Sarah posed an unexpected question that evening, asking if he'd ever consider being with another woman if given the chance, his answer was immediate and resolute. "No," he said. "You're all I'll ever need." To his astonishment, Sarah's reaction was far from appreciative. Her expression soured, her eyes rolling in exasperation as she muttered something he couldn't quite catch. Perplexed, Ethan pressed her, asking what had upset her. That's when she delivered a revelation that shook him to his core. "Seriously? Not even once?" she said, her tone laced with incredulity. "I find that hard to believe, Ethan. Before we got together, you had plenty of experience. I've barely had any." She hesitated briefly before continuing. "There's this guy at work. He's incredibly attractive, and I've been thinking about maybe hooking up with him. Just once, maybe more." Ethan's stomach turned. The woman he thought he knew, the one he had pledged to love and honor, was revealing a side of herself he couldn't recognize. Struggling to process her words, he sat frozen as Sarah's tone grew more assertive. "You have to understand," she continued, a sly smile playing on her lips. "One person can't fulfill all my needs. This is purely physical, nothing emotional." Ethan's disbelief quickly gave way to anger. Unease gnawed at him until, against his better judgment, he did something he never thought he'd do. He looked through her phone. His hands trembled as he scrolled through her messages and photos, uncovering far more than he had feared. Explicit texts and intimate images had already been exchanged with her coworker, evidence of a boundary already crossed. When Ethan confronted her, Sarah didn't deny it. Instead, she dismissed his anguish with startling indifference. "Yes, I've been sending him pictures," she admitted bluntly. "He's different from anyone I was with him. But it's just physical intimacy, Ethan. I still love you. I just need to explore this. Get it out of my system." Ethan's world crumbled. The woman he had married now seemed unrecognizable, callous, selfish, and consumed by her desires. When she suggested an open relationship, as though it were a minor adjustment, he was devastated. "You could have fun too," she added nonchalantly, ignoring his visible pain. But Ethan didn't want fun. He wanted her. As the days passed, Sarah's audacity only grew. She openly planned a weekend getaway with her coworker, rationalizing her actions with twisted logic. "You've always liked our role plays," she teased. "Maybe you'll enjoy this too. I could even record it for you." For Ethan, this was no game. It was a nightmare from which he couldn't wake. Sarah even suggested introducing him to her friends, hoping he'd embrace her version of freedom. She couldn't understand why he refused to pursue other women while she indulged in her coworker. The situation reached its breaking point one Saturday morning. Sarah, preparing for yet another rendezvous, asked Ethan to take provocative photos of her. "Don't be so uptight," she chided when he hesitated. Begrudgingly, he complied, each click of the camera further stoking his fury. When she left without so much as a goodbye, Ethan felt something inside him snap. That night, Sarah didn't return. When she finally came home, she recounted her escapades with shocking candor. "Two guys this time," she said with a smirk. "I know you didn't approve, but what's the harm? It was just fun." Ethan stood paralyzed, his emotions a maelstrom of heartbreak and fury. The woman he loved was gone, replaced by someone driven by reckless lust and blatant disregard for his feelings. In that moment, he realized he couldn't salvage what they had, but he could retaliate. Instead of confronting her outright, Ethan channeled his pain into a meticulous plan. He began by saving every explicit photo and message Sarah had exchanged with her coworker. Then, he reached out to the coworker's girlfriend, sowing seeds of doubt and encouraging her to question her partner's fidelity. Soon, cracks began to form in their relationship. Ethan didn't stop there. He started spreading rumors within Sarah's workplace, crafting whispers about her affair that soon gained traction among her colleagues. Oblivious to the storm brewing around her, Sarah continued her escapades, unaware of the damage to her reputation. The final blow came one evening when Sarah returned home after yet another tryst. Ethan waited calmly, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said. Sarah, dismissive as ever, barely acknowledged him, but his next words froze her in her tracks. "I've spoken to your coworker's girlfriend," he said evenly. The look on her face confirmed it. The game was over. She could feel her world collapsing around her. Ethan had been meticulous in his approach. "I've had conversations with your colleagues," he began, his voice sharp and distant. "Even your boss has expressed concerns about your behavior." Then, delivering the final blow with a chilling calmness, he said, "I've already filed for divorce." The color drained from Sarah's face as Ethan presented the damning evidence he had gathered. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but the steely determination in his eyes stopped her cold. "You've destroyed everything," he declared, his tone devoid of warmth, "and you're not walking away unscathed." For the first time, Sarah truly understood the consequences of her actions. But it was far too late. Ethan's plan was already in motion, an unstoppable chain reaction that left her powerless to intervene. The man she had once manipulated with ease was now firmly in control. Ethan watched as Sarah crumbled under the weight of her own choices, and though her pain brought him a grim sense of satisfaction, a dark question lingered in his mind. Was this the conclusion of their story, or the beginning of something far more twisted? His revenge had been calculated and ruthless, but would it be enough? Could he walk away satisfied, or would his thirst for vengeance drive him to go even further? As Sarah sobbed, her tearful apologies and pleas for forgiveness met only silence. Ethan turned on his heel and left, leaving her to face the wreckage of her decisions alone. Yet as he stepped out of their apartment, a strange emptiness settled within him. His revenge, though justified in his eyes, offered no real solace. The wound her betrayal had inflicted on him remained raw and unhealed. Still, he resolved to continue. Sarah would not only suffer but lose everything she cherished, one piece at a time. Her career became his next target. Ethan had already sown the seeds of doubt among her colleagues, planting whispers that cast shadows on her professionalism. Rumors of inappropriate relationships began to circulate, and her boss's wary looks hinted at growing suspicion. But quiet whispers weren't enough for Ethan. He wanted her downfall to be absolute and public. Over the following days, Ethan painstakingly compiled every incriminating piece of evidence he could find. Explicit messages, compromising photos, and recordings that documented her indiscretions. Each discovery fueled his anger, a bitter reminder of her betrayal and broken promises. When his collection was complete, he crafted an anonymous email and sent it to her company's HR department. The message was blunt, attaching the evidence and directly implicating her in unethical behavior. To ensure action, he provided contact details for her supervisor, making it impossible for the accusations to be ignored. The repercussions were immediate. Sarah was summoned to an emergency HR meeting, suspended pending an investigation, and left on the verge of losing her position. Her co-worker, the man involved in her affair, faced swift consequences as well, fired on the spot after his furious girlfriend confronted him with the evidence Ethan had provided. In a matter of days, Sarah's professional life was in tatters, her reputation obliterated. Gossip spread rapidly, and Ethan observed from a distance, taking satisfaction in her public humiliation. But even that wasn't enough. As the weeks passed, Ethan's actions grew colder and more calculated. Sarah's attempts to contact him shifted from desperate pleas to angry protests, but she still failed to grasp the gravity of what she had done. To her, the affair was a fleeting indulgence, a selfish pursuit of pleasure. To Ethan, it was the complete annihilation of his trust, his love, and the future he had envisioned for them. Determined to strip Sarah of every source of support, Ethan turned his attention to her personal relationships. Her new group of friends, women who shared her progressive views on relationships, were largely unaware of the full extent of her actions. They knew of the affair, but had no idea of the sordid details. Ethan decided they needed to know everything. Using a fake social media profile, he befriended Mia, Sarah's closest ally. With calculated precision, he steered their conversations toward topics of infidelity and open relationships, gradually gaining her trust. When the moment was right, he revealed the full truth, the texts, photos, and recordings that exposed Sarah's betrayal in its entirety. Mia's reaction was one of shock and disgust. The fallout was swift and devastating. Sarah's friendships unraveled, leaving her isolated and disgraced. The women who had once supported her now regarded her with contempt, horrified by her reckless disregard for loyalty and trust. Any attempts Sarah made to defend herself were met with indifference. The damage was irreversible. As the divorce proceedings advanced, Sarah's desperation grew. She begged Ethan for fairness, seeking to salvage whatever dignity and financial stability she could. But Ethan had no intention of relenting. To him, the path forward was clear. Sarah had to lose everything. Here is a rewritten version of the text with the same narrative style and meaning preserved. Ethan was unwavering in his quest to dismantle everything Sarah held dear: her career, her relationships, her self-respect, and now her financial independence. His lawyer, a shrewd and relentless tactician, had meticulously orchestrated the divorce proceedings to leave Sarah with almost nothing. As the primary breadwinner throughout their marriage, Ethan held all the leverage. With Sarah's recent job suspension and the fallout from a scandal he had deliberately set in motion, her position was utterly weakened. In the courtroom, Ethan radiated composure, flawlessly embodying the image of a wronged and heartbroken husband. He presented an arsenal of evidence: text exchanges, incriminating photographs, and video recordings that seemed to document Sarah's prolonged affair with a co-worker. The narrative painted her as reckless, selfish, and the primary cause of their marriage's collapse. Sarah, by contrast, appeared broken and diminished. The commanding aura she once carried had all but vanished, leaving her a shadow of herself. The judge seemed indifferent to her plight, and the ruling was brutal. Ethan was awarded the vast majority of their shared assets, while Sarah was left with a mere fraction of what she once depended on. She had lost everything: her job, her friends, her marriage, and now her sense of independence. Ethan's plan had worked to perfection, reducing Sarah's life to rubble. Watching her world disintegrate had given him the satisfaction he craved. But as he returned to his now barren apartment, devoid of Sarah's presence, he was struck by an unexpected void. The victory he had sought so fervently tasted bitter, leaving behind an ache he hadn't anticipated. Her betrayal had wounded him deeply, and he had ensured she paid the price. Yet now, with his mission accomplished, a troubling question began to haunt him. What remained for him now? The anger that had driven him hadn't disappeared. Instead, it seemed to linger, darker and more oppressive than before. Ethan felt himself morphing into someone he no longer recognized, cold, unrelenting, and consumed by vengeance. As weeks turned into months, Ethan's isolation deepened. In his obsession with punishing Sarah, he had severed most of his personal connections. Now, with his goal achieved, he began to see the toll his actions had taken on his own life. He had been so fixated on making her suffer that he had ignored his own need for healing. One quiet evening, while sitting alone in his silent apartment, his phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Her words were brief, stripped of anger or pleading. "I'm sorry for everything. I've lost everything because of my mistakes. I just hope one day you can forgive me." Ethan stared at the message, reading it again and again. Forgive her? The concept was alien to him. He had believed that vengeance would bring him closure, a sense of justice. But now, in the emptiness of his life, he realized that peace had eluded him completely. Destroying Sarah hadn't repaired the damage to his soul. It had only deepened the wounds. In his pursuit of revenge, he hadn't just ruined her life. He had also forfeited parts of himself. Without replying, he deleted the message and turned off his phone. Ethan had achieved the revenge he sought, but the triumph was hollow. Alone, he stared into the void left in the wake of his actions. What he had thought would be a moment of satisfaction revealed itself as a cruel illusion. The weight of his choices pressed heavily on him, and he was left with the sobering truth. Revenge, no matter how gratifying it seems in the moment, can never truly heal the pain of betrayal. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.